Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with another exclusive episode of the Yakking Show for our premium members. First, let me introduce co-host Kathleen Beauvais from Waterloo in Ontario. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you all again for tuning into the show. We so appreciate you and love reading your comments, so please keep those coming. We always have interesting guests for our premium members, and today is no exception. We have the great privilege of welcoming Dave Fradin, who was a previous guest on our show about a year ago. He is the founder of Spice Catalyst. Dave has trained hundreds of managers throughout the world. He infuses his workshops with insights and experiences gained as a product leader at companies like Apple and HP. Today, he'll be discussing the 5 points of his Spice Catalyst principles. Peter?
Good. Well, Dave, we're living in uncertain times. Many people say unprecedented in human history. It's certainly unsettled, and we're heading into what we call uncharted waters. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs and business owners to help us succeed in what for many are very unsettling times?
Well, the overall key thing is that whatever product or products or services is nothing more than a tangible product. To be successful is if they are successful, then the company is going to be successful. And this also goes for government agencies and nonprofits and charities and churches. It's the same 5 keys to product success, which happens to be a mnemonic for the word spice in the title of my company, Spice Catalyst. The S stands for strategy, the P stands for process, the I stands for information, the C stands for customer, and the E stands for your employees or your staff. So I thought I might go through each of those in a little bit more detail.
Yes.
By strategy, what I'm talking about is the product's market strategy. A market is a place where you go to buy something. The marketing is the process of getting people to go to the market. So what I'm saying is it's a market strategy that is the strategy for the product in the particular market that it's in. Like an iPhone is in the cell phone market, for example. And there are 32 components of the product market strategy that you need to think through and actually write a plan. And the word plan and strategy mean exactly the same thing. A strategy is a plan, and a plan is a strategy. So for your product market strategy, first you have to understand what is it that your customer wants to do. And that's a more granular approach than Synergim's jobs to be done or Harvard's outcome-based innovation. So for example, what I want, the job I have to get done or the outcome is, for example, this afternoon I want to drive into San Jose and have lunch. Well, the things I have to do is first confirm whether or not I want to drive all the way there or drive to the light rail station and take that in. Once I make that decision, I have to figure what path I'm going to follow, and then check when I get in the car if I've got enough gas to get there and get back. And then once I pick the path and get to and figure out the directions to downtown San Jose, because not everybody knows their way to San Jose, then I have to find a place to park near the restaurant that I've had to pick out and make sure that they're still open, because under COVID, a lot of restaurants are not yet opening lunch. And then I want to park nearby, and do they have a parking space? And then how am I going to pay the parking fare, since many of the garages have now gone entirely automatic? Do I have the app on my phone to be able to pay for the thing, or will I end up with a ticket, and on and on and on? So understanding what it is that a customer wants to do is the most important thing for a company or an organization to sort out. And that's the first part of the product market strategy. With that in mind, you can then do design thinking, which is observing what it is that people do and designing products and or services, and then rapidly iterating on them so that you know that it's actually going to solve their problem. And that's related to the issue of, can you ask people what they want? And no, you can't, because if people do what they want, that means they've not only defined the problem they have, but they also have defined the solution, which means they got to think in the problem space and think in the solution space at the same time. And most people can't do that. An example of that is Henry Ford allegedly once went out in his hometown of Dearborn, which was just south west of where I grew up in Detroit, and in the early 1900s, and he was thinking about creating a mass-produced car. So he called, so he asked people, would you like to have a car? And they said, no, I don't want a car. I just want a faster horse. Well, if he had spent some time at a local pub looking out the window, he would have seen people galloping their horses and whipping them with a whip to go faster and faster, because they needed to get from point A to point B faster, and they wanted to get their goods from point A to point B faster with their horse. So the question you should have asked is, would you like a way to get from point A to point B faster? And of course, the answer to that would be yes, which is a different answer than no, I don't want a car.
Sure.
Another side story to that is, if he had done like a lot of people are doing now, searching the internet for the keywords that people are using, and then deriving from those keywords what the problem is that they want solved, and then developing products for that. If the internet existed back then, and Henry Ford did a Google keyword search for the word car, he would have found that nobody was searching for cars, and nobody was searching for automobiles. So therefore, all of these cars we see out there, all these roads, are a mirage, because people didn't really want cars. It's because they weren't searching for that problem.
Right.
And that's illustrative of a notion that came out of Stanford Computer Science School about 20 years ago, called wisdom of the crowds, claiming that if more people click on this link than on that link, then this link is probably more relevant. And that, of course, ignores the fact that people tend to spread negative information 10 times more than positive information, which led to the algorithms in Facebook and in YouTube that help spread all the misinformation in the country, leading to in this election in the United States in about 3 weeks, 350 candidates for office at all levels of state and federal government that believe that the election was stolen in 2020, when Joe Biden won the election by, I think, 9 million more votes than what Trump got. So the wisdom of the crowds is also the wisdom of stupidity, as illustrated by people every now and then go into a nightclub, fire breaks out, and everyone tries to leave through the same door, forgetting for a moment there's got to be a back door behind the stage, which will enable them to get out. So those are the things that you have to take into account as you do design thinking, and understanding what your customer wants to do. And what the customer is doing. And the questions that you need to ask is, what do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? Where do they want to do it? How do they do it? What's important about getting it done? How important is it? How satisfied are they with the current solution? And an illustration of that is when a man and woman decided to write down things or draw pictures. They grabbed a piece of burnt wood or charcoal and they drew on the side of their caves. Then they noticed that the cave was not that mobile. They couldn't take it to the next cave and show their friends. So they took chips of rock and slate and they wrote on that. They took that to the next cave to show what things they wrote down or pictures that they drew. And then they noticed their hands were getting dirty, and that was kind of messy, that to have to always wash their hands. So humankind then wrapped the charcoal with wood, and they called that a pencil. They noticed the thing wore down over time, and someone said, "Hey, let's take this quill from a bird and use ink." And then they noticed that you had to dip the thing every few seconds into the ink well. So the ballpoint pen was invented. And then people noticed that that was pretty slow, so a typewriter was invented. Then the electric typewriter, and then word processing in specialized word processing things like Wang's word processor and Xerox's word processor. And it's kind of unusual that Xerox would do such a thing, because the story about Xerox is they never do anything original. And then that evolved into word processing on your personal computer and your laptop and your iPad and so forth. But the thing that's being done is the same, going
Yes.
all the way back to the charcoal in the cave.
Mhm.
And that is putting your thoughts down in writing or in pictures on something that someone else can see and read and hopefully comprehend. So understanding what it is your customer wants to do and whether or not they're satisfied with the current solution, the relationship with the importance of getting that done and how satisfied, then opens up a unmet need. And if you can find 15 unmet needs for your particular product or service, then your chances are you're going to have a successful product or service.
How did you come up with the 15?
That came from Synergym, who's president, who I forget his name offhand. He was a manufacturing engineer for IBM on the IBM PC Junior.
Mhm.
And it was a silly naming of a product. I mean, how many people want to buy the Junior product? You know, everyone wants the Pro product or the big one or the Max and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Apple never named anything Junior. Even if your son is named Junior, nobody wants anything to do with him. So he came up with the 15 unmet needs in his study of jobs to be done. And he's got a book that's available. You can just Google it, which goes into more detail on how to figure out your customer's prospective 15 unmet needs. If you have less than that, chances are your product will not be successful. If a number of competitors jump into the marketplace and start solving those 15 unmet needs, then it's time to do what the Boston Consulting Group talks about, and that is turn your product into a cash cow, and then eventually bring the product to rest, exit the market with that particular product or service.
Dave, you're referring to a product, but would all these 15 unmet needs also apply to, say, a service as well?
Very much so.
Okay.
Give you an example of that. I got a loan from the Small Business Administration during COVID for my company. And it was only like a 3% loan. So that's pretty good money. So I borrowed it. And they gave everybody 18 months before they had to make their first payment. So they sent out an email 3-4 months ago. And they sent it again just a few weeks ago because I knew my first payment was due in October. And the email sends me to a website. And there's no place there to pay. So wait a minute. So I get a letter from the SBA says I have to make a payment. Go to this website. There's no place to pay. Well, there was an email address there. I could email for support, which I did. And to my surprise, they responded. I mean, usually, the government's not really there to help you. And they came back. Oh, no, you have to go to this other website to make your payment. So I wrote back to them. I said, this is stupid. You just sent me this email. And I quoted the thing. Why did you send me to this website, which is just a dashboard to see about the status of my loan? And I'm sitting there, how many hundreds of thousands of businesses took out SBA loans? Am I the only stupid one that can't figure out how to pay something at a URL that they told me to go pay at?
Yeah.
Clearly, nobody there has bothered to get into the shoes of a small business and try to navigate their mirage of websites and links and things you have to click on. Sort of like if you want to shut down your Windows computer, you go to start. What? You go to start to stop? And that's why many people call Microsoft should use the brand logo or a slogan, I should say, or tagline. Microsoft, helping more people feel more stupid than any other company in the world. They can transfer that to the Small Business Administration. So that's how I came up with the 15 unmet
15,
needs.
right.
And here in the case of the Small Business Administration, that's a service. And here too, they have not figured out what it is that their customer wants to do. Once you have all that nailed down, then you need to innovate. And innovate is a buzzword these days, like entrepreneur was a few years ago. Now everybody's into innovation. Nobody knew what an entrepreneur was 20 years ago. And I wrote a blog article on my website, spicecatalyst.com, which says entrepreneur is just French for product manager.
Yeah.
That's what a product manager does. But they had to put a French word on it, so it sounded exotic, like a
Sounded
criminal.
exotic. Yeah. Right.
So then so innovation is doing nothing more than doing something faster, better, at lower cost, higher quality. And Apple kind of adds to that with style. What did they come out with? A watch. Everybody has a watch. Or you look at your iPhone, it tells you what time it is. Why do I need to strap something on my wrist? So in their marketing campaign, they had influencers or famous people in their commercials wearing an Apple Watch. Then it became a status thing, and everybody had to buy one, which I appreciate because I own 0.00035% of Apple, and that helped increase my net worth.
Yes.
So after your innovation of doing something better and faster, then you need to figure out the persona of the customer that you're targeting. And if it's business to business, you need to understand your customer's customer better than your customer does. And if you do, then you can
Yes.
lock in your customer to stick with you.
Mm.
So the persona defines who it is that you're trying to sell to, what's their motivators, where do they get their information from, so you can use that for your marketing later on. And then you do your competitive research and your market research, identify your target market, segment your market, forecast what your potential sales may be into that market, figure out the cost of development, your return on investment, your distribution strategy, your trading plan, your sales plan, and then eventually your marketing plan. And that comprises the major elements of your product market strategy. Now, a lot of companies get started on their product first, and some entrepreneurs, or I should say venture capitalists and seed investors here in Silicon Valley, and that's not Silicon Valley behind me, that's the view from my lanai in Maui.
Right.
But it looks a lot better than my messy bookshelf behind my desk. Then you understand who your customer is, and you have your product market strategy put together before you start doing what what seed investors and venture capitalists, a few of them say, and that is fail fast and iterate fast. Well, I agree with the iterations, the multiple rapid iterations, which is what you do in design thinking planning. But they pretty much are saying ready, fire, and then aim. Well, if you happen to be aiming or firing in the wrong direction, then you'll fail the company fast. And there are a number of examples of that. So I strongly support the notion of get your product market strategy written, which will take 1 to 3 people months worth of effort, but it'll be stretched out over probably 3 to 6 months, because you have to arrange to observe your prospective customers, interview them, and do some surveys so that you can extrapolate the results into your sales forecast and your size of the market that you're going after. And then you start your product development. So the next part of the SPICE 5 keys to product success is the process. And as many MBA schools teach, that if you have a process to develop a product and bring it to market, the more mature it is, the higher chances of product success. So you need to find your process. And I have a framework for a successful product on my website. And it's a product management framework, which you can borrow. And it takes into account things like agile and waterfall development, and it takes those things into account. After you've got your product market strategy, then you give it to development, and then you give it to marketing, and they figure out concurrently with the development how they're going to take it to market, how they're going to launch it, what the key value propositions are in order to meet those 15 unmet needs and so forth in the marketing plan, which is identifying the media you're going to use, which you've noticed through your personas where people are going to get information, and then it's the mix that you're going to use and how much money you're going to spend in each of those areas. And of course, one of the big areas over the last 10 years is social media, and it solves a major problem that marketeers and advertisers have had in the past. One marketeer or advertising executive said that I know that I'm wasting 50% of my advertising dollars. I just don't know which 50%. Well, now with big data, you can know exactly which ads are working based upon clicks and following people, and which ads are not working, and you could iterate and improve from there. So that's the P of the process. I is information, and that is get the information that you need in order to make product decisions. I was doing a research project about 10 years ago for a major networking company in their services department. And their market research, corporate market research group, subscribed to over 80 market research firms worldwide. None of the subscriptions that they had, though, covered services. They were all dealing with products. So I poked my way through 84 of the services that they subscribed to, and found 4 that had an add-on services package of that market research that covered services. So I called up the market research department and said, hey, I'm working on this project, and it has to deal with their services. What can you buy these 4 other services so I have the information available to make my recommendations to management to be successful? They said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any budget for that right now. This was like May. And that company had a new budget in August. He says, I'll put it in my budget, and if it gets approved, we'll probably get the approval in October, even though their fiscal year starts August 1st, which is typical of the short range planning many companies now go through. And then we'll buy those services. We'll probably get them next January, which is a year and a half in the future. And I'm saying, well, what am I going to do? Because my contract for this consulting ends in 6 months, and they didn't care. So a lot of companies make decisions and they don't have the information available in order to make those decisions on. The next letter is C, and that's understand your customer. And that goes back to the do of the product market strategy. Clearly understand what it is that your customer wants to do, why they want to do it, how they want to do it, where they want to do it, what's standing in their way, how important is it, and how satisfied are they with their current solution. And then the last letter in SPICE is E for employees. And in that case, make sure that you have within your organization experts on the 132 competencies or skill sets required in order to have a successful product. And that's it.
Okay, and so 130, you've identified 132 critical competencies.
Yes. I have a book out that Wiley published called Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit. And it's available on Amazon worldwide. It's a little pamphlet. It's only 796 pages long. And it's used by, what's the name of it? Lovely University in India for their MBA program. They teach a 7-month program. And I'm also using it as a basis for a 4-year program that Appleton Green is just rolling out on successful product management. Companies can subscribe to the Appleton Green workshops on product management. It's on Appleton Green's website. And in there, I have one whole chapter that goes into detail on the 132 competencies necessary for product and company success.
Okay.
Okay, that's useful. We'll put that link in there.
Yes, I was wondering, could we use, and not just because of what Peter and I do here as podcasters, but Podcasting has become very, very popular, and there are people out there that have turned it into a business. And I'm trying to think of your 15 unmet needs when it comes to somebody who's starting up something small. I mean, not necessarily just podcasting business, but a very small business. They don't have any employees. They're just starting up. And I'm wondering if we could just go through an exercise for somebody like that.
Yeah, suppose you lived in Los Angeles and you needed to get from point A to point B. So you call a taxi and the taxi doesn't show up. So you call the taxi company back again and nobody answers the phone. So you call them again and finally someone answers the phone. They say, "Oh, your cab's on its way." And he asks, "Where is the cab?" And the dispatcher says, "I don't know. He's out there someplace. He'll be there in 10 minutes. I said, "Well, if you don't know where the cab is, how do you know it's going to be here in 10 minutes? So you get quite frustrated getting from point A to point B. So a lot of entrepreneurs start out by just observing what problems it is that they have. And there was a guy by the name of Travis that observed that. He also noticed that the smartphone, starting in the late 2000s, predominantly with the iPhone, had the capability to run an app which could enable someone to order a cab and see it on the map where it is. And the neat thing is you already got your payment information in there, as opposed to getting out of your cab and the cab driver yells at you, "Hey, you didn't pay." And then you realize you don't have any cash and you don't have your checkbook with you, whatever a checkbook is. I haven't used one in years. And so how are you going to pay? And or then you find your cash and you got a $50 bill and the cab fare is $9.95 and the guy doesn't have any change and you don't want to give him a $40 tip and all of that kind of stuff. So Travis figured all that out, that people had a real problem getting from point A to point B and paying and tipping and getting out of the cab, and he decided to call it Uber. And another company came along called Lyft to compete with them. Now, if he lived in Washington, D.C. or New York, and I've lived in both, if you inadvertently scratch your nose, 10 cabs will pull over and offer to pick you up. So you have to refrain from scratching your nose, because the way you hail a cab in New York or Washington, you just go like this.
Yeah.
So I would not have, if he had been there, he would not have noticed that problem. So a lot of problems are solved by observing what it is that people do. Give you another example. Hewlett Packard had 3 divisions that had developed inkjet printers. And one of them was used as a plotter for design drawings, for architecture and other things. And they knew that it would be very helpful if they could plot things out in color, because they could have a color code for it. So those engineers in those 3 divisions, unbeknownst to them, the other 2 divisions were developing the same thing, which is not unusual for a diversified, decentralized company as HP was up until 1998. And it was one of the reasons it grew 20% a year every year for 50 years until the AT&T sales exec, Carly Farina, came in and decided she couldn't trust anybody but herself. So she centralized all of the decision-making in their corporate headquarters. So they thought it would be interesting to ship a color printer for personal computers. And they went out and asked people, "Do you want a color printer?" And this goes back to the Henry IV ask. And they said, "No, I want a faster horse." Oh, no, man, that's the other story. No, they said, "No, I don't want a color printer." And then they realized that they were asking the wrong question. The question was, and they changed it and said, "If we give you a black and white printer and add your ability to print in color at no extra cost, would that be something of interest to you?" And the answer was yes. And that's when the first HP color inkjet came out. And what they had observed is some people would send a memo and they would highlight with a yellow highlighter those important things that need to be focused on, or on an overhead transparency, or back in those days is called a foil. They would put color on the foil for their business presentations on their overhead projector. So HP naturally thought people would like to have a printer to do that kind of thing. So that gets back to the point of understanding what your customer wants to do.
Yeah, very much so. Interesting. So one of the problems, as I see it, when we hear from small businesses owners and again entrepreneurs using that term, that they're starting off on their own. They have very few resources in the way of manpower. They have very limited budgets to hire manpower. What's of all you've told us under strategy, where's the key starting point for someone with limited manpower, limited time, limited budget? What's the thing they should really focus on there?
It depends. It depends upon the product, the market, the geographical location, because it's different in the United States than it is in India, for example, versus Japan or Europe. Look at the entrepreneurs in Ukraine. Many companies have left Ukraine, and also, for that matter, Russia, and notice that they could run their businesses remotely from different areas of the world. So they improvised, and they figured out what are the most important things that they need to get done, and they focused on that, given whatever resources that they might have available. If they might need a cash infusion, then the thing that seed investors and venture capitalists are looking for is, do you have traction? Do you have real customers that are repeatable, and they keep coming back and buying again and again and again? And if you have that, you could demonstrate that you can generate a return on investment. Seed investors are looking for 100-to-1 return. Ventures 10 to 30 times whatever they put in, they want to get back out. So if you go through the product market strategy that I described earlier, when you have done your surveys based upon your interviews and your observations, your surveys of a repeatable select group of people or customers that resemble your overall market, you could use the numbers from that to project what the actual size of the market is. And that's a way of sizing the market from the bottom up, as opposed to a lot of companies look at the numbers put out by a market research firm and they say, okay, I'm going to grab 5% of that. And hence that's how much what my sales are going to be, and therefore our profits. Well, the problem behind that is that the market research firm is relying upon what companies in that market are telling them in terms of their sales. And I'll give you an example of that. One of the products I had when I was a product manager at Hewlett Packard was an executive report writer that ran on top of an image relational database, which ran on a mini computer, the HP 3000. So my sales were going to be into that installed base, and I needed to know how many HP 3000s had been sold. And nobody knew. Nobody knew in the sales organization. Nobody knew in the 3000 division. They had no idea. Well, my product, HP Inform, if I could get the tapes from corporate of all the purchase orders for the HP 3000, I could load that into the image database, and then I could read all of those transactions. So I and my lead engineer, who knew a lot more about it than I did that. And I found out that we had sold 7,000 HP 3000s through 1983 at HP. And I told the marketing manager, John Chelly, of my division, that this is what I found. They sold 3,000 of these, and I think I should be able to sell about 500 copies of HP Inform at $5,000 a piece. He says, okay, fine. A few days later, I'm sitting in his cubicle because the HP pioneered the open office. That way you could hear and smell everything anybody else is doing. And he gets a call from a market research firm, DataQuest. Coincidentally enough, I went to work for DataQuest a few years later as the associate director of their personal computer industry service. And the DataQuest guy says, I asked him, how many HP 3000s have been sold? He says, 10,000. And I'm sitting there going, what? I know it's 7,000.
Yeah.
So I wasn't rude enough yet to interrupt and say, that's a lie. I suppose I wanted to keep my job another few nanoseconds. And so when he hung up the phone, I asked him, why did you say 10,000? He says, well, they put out a market share graph every year, and I wanted HP to show as the largest market share of mini computers in the world, bigger than a Nemesis deck. So I thought about that over the years. And so if some company came along and based upon that DataQuest report, they said, okay, I'm going to get a 5% market share of 10,000. So 5% of 10,000 is what, 500. And I'm going to sell my software for $5,000. That's what, $25 million. And therefore, based upon that revenue, I can hire, 20 salespeople and 10 support people and so forth. And you go out and hire them. And then your sales come in at 350 because that's 5% of 7,000. And your $15 million is less than what you first projected. And a lot of people's lives are disrupted. And everybody knows that the three most anxiety, worrying things that happen in a person's life is paying taxes, someone close to them dying, or getting a divorce. Yep. So if any one of those three things happens, you're very depressed. So a lot of people's lives are ruined, at least for a short period of time, because John Shelley lied to DataQuest, and that's not the way to do the forecast. So that's why my approach of observing, interviewing to refine your survey instrument and surveying a representative sample of your target market is a far better way to project the size of your market and therefore what your potential sales might be.
Right. Okay. It makes a lot of sense. Let's look forward a little bit. You've probably got a much better crystal ball than we have. So post-COVID, post-Ukraine, post-recession, 3 to 5 years, what are some of the major disruptions you see coming for many businesses?
We call that the perfect storm. There's about 15 things that are swirling out there. And when I put together the list, I didn't have pandemic listed on the 15 items. If I had been listening to Bill Gates, he was talking about worldwide pandemics back in 2000, I think it was 2015.
Yeah.
It's that we were not ready yet. So there are things like artificial intelligence, as if there's any real intelligence in the world, but artificial intelligence promises to make some changes. Climate change, look at what happened in Florida because the Republican administrations there refused to enforce higher building standards after the hurricane 15 years ago. Yet one community northeast of Fort Myers, which was ground zero for Hurricane Ian, they rebuilt after that, put in a solar grid, and pretty much everything is still standing and everything is fine because they had built to higher standards. Right. So the inflow of ocean rise is going to affect millions of people, not only in the United States, but around the world. So that's another thing that needs to be taken into account. Genome splicing, the mRNA COVID vaccine came about from that, whose major research goes back at least 10 years and has been considered a possible solution to the problem back 30 years. And President Biden just announced, I think it was yesterday, a new pandemic strategy for the United States government to follow and implement in the case of another pandemic. The interesting thing is Obama had a similar plan and had a group in the National Security Council in the White House focused on these kinds of health issues. And Trump disbanded that when he became president, which didn't help at all in dealing with the COVID pandemic. So those are some of the things that what you should do is in my books, I have a whole chapter on the perfect storm and each of these things that I've identified. And you should sit down once you've put your product market strategy together and say, okay, how is my strategy going to be affected by each of these different perfect storm things?
Right. There's one you've probably done some work on it. A lot of people haven't and are now surprised at the effect on the job market and productivity because of the rapidly retiring our generation baby boomers. So we are seeing in Canada job numbers falling because of the economy is not so good, but certain sections of certain industries just cannot get people to work for them. And the trucking industry in particular is suffering from aging drivers who get to 70, 75 and say, I don't want the hassle of medicals every year and renewing my heavy duty driver's license. I'm out of here. So trucking industry is suffering at that end. But when I go into our little city, every one of our coffee houses, we have a thing called Tim Hortons up here, has got a we're hiring sign. And they've even got signs inside saying we're short staffed, please be patient and don't take your frustration out on our customers type thing. And a lot of service industries, exactly the same problem. So it seems to be an odd one that you should have contraction at one end and shortage of opportunities at the other and shortage of labor. What's your view on that one?
Yeah, very much so. If we look at Japan, which has had no immigration rules for years, and I forget what their demographics are, but a lot of their aging people, and they have very few young people. And then China is about to get hit by the same thing. As a result of one child per family. Now they're offering money to families to have multiple children. I forget, some country, might have even been Russia, was offering a free van if you had at least 4 or 6 kids.
Wow.
There's the hope that robotics, and China is placing big bets on robotics, will be able to replace those younger workers in the factories. But with China's aggressive stance towards the United States and the rest of the world, I just saw the other day that Apple has a goal of, for the next couple of years, to get at least 10% of their manufacturing out of China into other countries. And they have indeed expanded in India. I think it's Brazil and Vietnam, their manufacturing facilities. Because that's a big threat. If Xi tries to invade Taiwan simply for the unification of the Chinese continent, that's going to disrupt semiconductors and manufacturing for the whole world. Those kinds of trends. I just saw the other day, the United States is short 100,000 childcare workers. And it's because the childcare workers will go any place else where they can make more than $15 an hour and not have to listen to a screaming kid all day. And that's the problem that your coffee houses have, is they're simply not paying enough.
That's right.
I don't know how much Starbucks has mitigated that when they offer a free college education if you work at Starbucks, and Amazon is doing the same thing. If you work for Amazon, they're offering free higher education and technical skills training. So I think we'll see larger companies doing more of those kinds of things in addition to increasing their pay.
So if you look at the example you just quoted of Apple setting a target for how much they want to move out of China, is this going to curtail outsourcing of manufacturing facilities, not just to China, but certain other parts of the world as well, because of the potential risks? Will it bring more manufacturing jobs back to North America?
Yeah, it will. And Biden's programs to create jobs in the United States, the recent semiconductor bill, I forgot how much they've committed. I think it's like $50 billion to help fund the manufacturing of semiconductors in the United States. And Intel is opening a new facility down in Phoenix, I think also in Ohio. It probably won't replace the millions of blue-collar jobs that got displaced under Clinton's globalization plans, but it certainly is going to help. And
it's going to help.
COVID demonstrated the weakness of supply chains and
Yes.
the need to build things closer to where people consume them. There's a possibility that driverless trucks may help alleviate some of the long haul trucking. There are experiments now where trucks are going from the port of Long Beach up to Sacramento on Highway I-5 without any drivers.
Without any drivers, right.
And they, of course, can follow one another very closely because the truck in front can tell the truck in back, hey, we got to brake here before we hit this thing. And so they can actually put more vehicles on the same roads, the more they become driverless over time. But there are some skeptics that it may not work. But those disruptions in the labor force are going to affect things.
What about power? Now we're seeing in Europe huge problems because of the Ukraine war with reduction in electricity generation. I have a brother in UK who was telling me some fairly horror stories of what they're worried about this winter. Do you think that particularly in Europe is going to have a major effect on business, on infrastructure, on development?
Yeah, it will. And in fact, if the Europeans, and they're moving very, very rapidly towards this, replaced their gas furnaces with heat pump furnaces, to the tune of 10 million of them, they could eliminate their dependency on Russian gas and reduce their dependency on petroleum, which is used to produce electricity in some of those countries. So I think it's all going to accelerate the move to alternative energies, to full electrification. And if our manufacturers can make enough heat pumps and get them installed, and that's a big problem, is finding the contractors that are willing to install it. I put solar on my roof a year and a half ago, and now I get this enormous electric bill every month of $10 when before it was over $200.
Yeah.
And then when it gets hot out, I can turn the air conditioning down to 73, and it doesn't cost me anything. So I wanted to replace my gas hot water heater with an electric heat pump hot water heater, which is much more efficient than the old electric hot water heaters. And I went out to 15 contractors, said, hey, I want to install a Rheem 110 volt shared circuit, which is just about to ship. What are you going to charge me? And I got quotes anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000.
Wow.
And the hot water heater is about $2,000. And I'm the son of a plumber. I worked a couple summers as an apprentice plumber, and I put in a few dozen hot water heaters. Doesn't take more than an hour or two.
No.
So why are you charging $8,000 or more for half a day to a day's labor? And then I got another company that Harvest Thermal has a heat pump system that does hot water heating and cooling all in one unit. And I got a quote, what was it? It was $80,000 to install this thing.
Wow.
And the ROI is just not there. When I did my solar last year, it was $18,000 minus the tax rebates. So it drops it to about $14,000 in California. And I'll break even on my capital investment about 4 or 5 years. After that, it's all free, or I'm making money. And so at $80,000, it's a 40-year life before I get my return on investment. I intend to live at least another 40 years, but in my older age, I don't particularly care about such things. So that's one of the major challenges that Europe has, is finding the contractors that have been trained and have enough heat pump based appliances manufactured so that those buildings and homes can be converted to all electric. And they will probably do that. And 5 years from now, since the only thing that Russia has to export is oil and Iranian drones, they're going to be a big world of hurt as a country.
Yeah, but everything we've just been talking about for the last few minutes, sorry, Kathleen, creates opportunities, David. It creates hardship and problems for some,
Mhm.
but whenever there's chaos, there's opportunities, right?
Very much so.
So
And-
we're running low on time, Dave.
Yes.
But we just wanted to ask you one last, if you have any final thoughts on the 5 points of your SPICE principles. Was there anything else you'd like to say about that for our viewers and our listeners?
No, I've said enough already.
Okay. So there's something else important we got to ask you. Well, two things, one of which Kathleen will ask in a moment. But before I forget, do you want to tell our audience who may not have watched your earlier episode about your books and where they can get them?
Mm.
Yeah, my successful product design and management toolkit is available at Amazon. You can find it by searching for my name, and I'll come up as the author of that, I hope. And then another book that's there is Building Insanely Great Products. And another one is, if you're a manager at the C-level, it's Organizing and Managing Insanely Great Products.
Excellent.
Now, how do
And,
people contact you?
They can go to my website, spicecatalyst.com.
Mhm.
I have a form there they could fill out, or they can send me an email directly to Dave at spicecatalyst.com.
Excellent.
We will put that all on there for our audience. Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us once again, Dave. It's been quite enlightening. Thank you. And we always welcome your suggestions for the type of guests you'd like to see for our show. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself about that. And until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.